points that I find very relevant. So the first one is that we need to separate the concept of a wallet and identity, that they're two different things. And then we need to have a model that allows for sort of reclaiming that identity. So this is a problem I've spent quite a lot of time thinking recently, and I would like to suggest a framework that perhaps will be useful to think about this problem, where all of us here, as we sit as physical people, we are comprised of entity and identity, right? So an entity is our legal person or our legal rights, and the influence of that entity can be measured in our assets, right? So the money that we have, how we can impact the world by moving these assets. But we're also identities, our names, our reputation, and the attention that is being paid to us. So attention in this context is the equivalent of money. So that's how I would frame this. So if you follow that framework, you can actually adopt that in the context of trustless systems, where wallets, smart contracts, all of these things, they are entities, whereas our identities would be a product of the totality of attention that is being paid to that identity, right? If you accept that assumption, well, then we can take it further and we can start thinking, okay, how would you be able to define an identity? Well, the identity is the sum of attention that's being paid to you. Well, if you want to reclaim that, where is this attention being paid to you? Where you can document that? And therefore, you can leverage all of the, let's say, forums, social media, and other platforms where this attention can be quantified, and now leverage this multiple of accounts that together create your identity and correspond to your physical identity in that sense. And you can use these independent services, let's say Twitter, GitHub, and so on, to collectively act as a way of reclaiming the identity.
To kick us off, I think from yesterday, there were 3 specific areas that seem to bubble up to the top in terms of education concepts. And this is not exclusive, so if there's something else you want to add to the bio, please do. One was around educating ourselves within the Ethereum community. So those who are working on Ethereum projects and want to be more knowledgeable about best practices that may be in the space. I think that kind of came from the core principles where we talked about technical competence. And that brought a lot of discussion of how do we know people are competent in certain areas, how do we share learnings from that. So one, how do we tackle educating ourselves within Ethereum around best practices, things that other projects have solved so that we're not reinventing the wheel every time. So that's topic 1. Topic 2 was educating the rest of the world around Ethereum. So where do we go in terms of sharing experiences? I think a lot of people said coming into Ethereum they had to go to 50, 100 different places to kind of paste together how to learn more about Ethereum and its benefits and how to join the community. How do we streamline that? What are maybe areas that we can point people towards, or platforms that we might be able to use in terms of educating people to bring them into Ethereum? And then the third aspect, which is maybe a little bit more specific, is specifically within the developer community, for those who are working in tech, how do we bring them along into Ethereum? There might be some aspects of working on an open source project that might be a little bit of a resistance factor for developers coming into the community, so is there something that we need to tackle there? I know these are 3 very big and broad topics, so I will turn it over to everyone to kind of start the discussion from there, or Alex, if there's anything else you wanted to add from that standpoint.
Because enthusiasts could also be developers, and people outside of the crypto community could be developers as well. So kind of get onboarding in a very funny and friendly way. It's something that I'm really looking forward to do, that empowers people to just kind of ask the basic questions and don't actually have to go towards the community and keep reiterating or looking for different sources, and just having like a single source that would provide the basic concepts of Ethereum and blockchain would be very helpful, not only for users, but also for new developers into this space, no matter how how much technical competence they have. The basic questions still lie as the same as for our parents or other family members who have no idea how all of this stuff works. The problem would be how to, like you said, to fund these initiatives, but also at the same time, how to make it very open to contribute. Because sometimes you find all of these sources are actually very resistant to having outside contributors for gathering this information and curating it. And I think one of the best examples that we can all agree is Wikipedia has done a great job of doing this and aggregating all of the information in one place, and at the same time allowing a very good process for contributing to that knowledge base.
I would actually personally like to see more community-driven educational efforts rather than it kind of coming from the top down and from the Ethereum Foundation, because that always feels nice at the beginning, but it always has the danger of centralization and a lot of times we don't mean to make it centralized, but the kind of the secondary effect of making something, putting something from the top down is that people feel they're not empowered, or people feel like they don't know how to, they're intimidated, versus if people who are participating see these efforts coming from the community and see that these efforts are started by people just like them, they feel much more empowered to take action and do things themselves.
You have different working groups have different goals, different targets they work on. The topic they might cover might differentiate vary in the complexity as well. So when you form a working group on a very complex topic, and then you run into the meetup problem because you need to cover all the content again and you need to educate people which join later, this will just slow down the process of finding actually something actionable. So I think trying to regulate or build a framework which clearly defines how this working group should and need to work to be legitimate is a difficult thing to do. Especially given the situation that there might be even different cultures in different working groups, how they work together. I could only think about something more general. We try to achieve a goal together. This is the working group. We define how we want to work together as a working group in the beginning. So like you form a team, you have the initiation phase where you set up some rules and how you want to work together. And then you have the chance of forming actually teams which can work efficiently together because they had that initiation and that coordination in the beginning. But this is obviously contradictory to having a radical open policy, right? So what I'm saying here is you need to make a trade-off, and I don't want to say that open policy is always the right way to go, exactly for the reason I mentioned. On the other side, you need to have public results, and you need to find a way to onboard people later in the process as well, right?
That we should have a way in the context of magicians. I think a lot of the things we've said are communities or communities of interest. Again, from the IETF, they have the concept of birds of a feather that happen at in-person events, so people who are interested in the same topic, which is not the same thing as a working group. It's not more or less formal, it's just different at the end of the day. I would like to say, and part of this is just coming up with terminology in the context of magicians, we're going to say working groups is a thing that forms around a topic for a set of EAPs. So I think there's some goal setting. The work we have to do is really the form or the thing to fill out, not as a formal piece of it, but as an understanding of what pieces you might want to put together. So I think the Ethereum Magicians itself has good discussions where we can already have ad hoc groups. This is actually trying to take it to the next level to move it along. I think documenting all of these things is another task that we have to just bring them all together in a certain way. And like Griff said, I would love if magical TCRs spring from the sky that I can just do all of these as TCRs. For now, it will be a wiki page on the magicians as the first start of it. I took notes on this, so I will put some of that stuff up. The very specific goal is in 3 months, the magicians will likely plan something around DevCon, and ideally by then, I would like to see N working groups who do the work of self-organizing and bringing together their set of participants as the first set of scalability, so it's not all having been done by the central magicians group in some way. I think that's the first outcome of this that sticks with the goal of EIPs, and then there's so many other things that I think crosses over of communities. We've talked about tools, we've talked about best practices. This is playbook stuff that I'm sure we could recruit a lot of people into putting down.
Projector, right?
I still